Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the North Stonington Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, Tuesday, March 26th, 2024 at 6:09 p.m. Members present, Pat Lewis, Wayne Wilkinson, John Cacchione, alternate members, Mark Perkins. Staff present, Administrative Assistant Cheryl Consavage, Town Planner and Zoning Official Susan C. Cullen, a Juliet Hodge, Planning Consultant for the POCD. So now we got the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, John?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. If you want to read it, John, you can, number 4.
Public hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission to hear and consider the Plan of Conservation and Development for adoption of the plan.
At this time, would hand over the floor to Susan Cullen, the Town Planning and Development and Zoning Official, who will provide an introduction. So what do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, God. I didn't even think of that. Who wants to be seated for,
Which of us
Oh.
members?
which one of you guys wants to be seated?
No, it's the 4 regular members, so it would be Ed, Pat, John, and Wayne.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, because we have an alternate, correct.
All right.
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Cullen, the Planning and Development Official for the town of North Stonington. Under statutory authority, under Chapter 126, the town is required every 10 years to effect a plan of conservation and development. The state statute is very specific about the things that it has to cover. You must prepare, amend, and adopt a plan for the municipality. Plan must establish development policies and goals, provide for efficient transportation network, promote coordinated development in the municipality, recommend the most desirable use of land for residential, recreational, commercial, industrial, conservation, agricultural, and other purposes, recommend the most desirable density of population in several parts of the municipality, note any inconsistencies with a variety of growth management principles mentioned in Connecticut General Statute 824, make provision for the development of housing opportunities, including opportunities for multifamily dwellings, promote housing choice and economic diversity in housing, including housing for both low and moderate income households, and encourage the development of housing which will meet the housing needs identified in the state's consolidated plan for housing and community development, and consider allowing older adults and persons with disabilities the ability to live in their homes and communities whenever possible. In addition to focusing on the availability and the use of municipal infrastructure elements, the plan may designate areas proposed for conservation and preservation, such as ridge lines, open space areas, and also for development as greenways. The statutory requirement for the plan of conservation and development must be updated at least once every 10 years. This is very important, and if a commission fails to do so, they must submit a letter of explanation to the Secretary of State's Office of Policy and Management, as well to the Commissioners of Energy and Environmental Protection, Economic and Community Development, and Transportation. And any subsequent application for funding past the 10-year rule may result in the withholding of state aid. As of December 31st, we had met that 10-year mark. And your first selectman, Mr. Carlson, had filed an extension for the town of North Stonington for 90 days. That 90 days ends on March 31st. So in effect, we need to finish our homework and turn it into the state so that we don't lose any of our state aid. So I say that to tell you how important this hearing is tonight for us to weigh in and finish this plan and get it turned into the state. Now, that being said, that doesn't say that in the future, if something materially changed in town, something unexpected happened, and we needed to update our plan of conservation and development, that we wouldn't have the ability to do that. We absolutely would. We could literally close it tonight, vote on it tonight, say it's good, and 2 months from now, if something big happened and we wanted to change it, we could start the process again. So you don't have to wait for the 10-year cycle. If something changes and you feel it's necessary, feel it's important to come back, we can do that. But for tonight, we are up against sort of a deadline of trying to make sure that we turn in this plan and keep the promise that we gave to the state about turning it in before March 31st. So what you're going to see tonight is a presentation by Juliet Hodge, who was your former planner and who also was hired as a planning consultant. I also have to apologize to you because since I've only been with you for a matter of just a couple of months, many of your questions tonight, I won't be able to answer. Hopefully your commissioners will be able to answer them. There may be other members of the audience that might be able to answer them. You have other government officials here. Juliet is here and she was with you for a long time. So I'll just say in advance that although I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to weigh in on anything procedurally, the substance of things probably really isn't going to be for me to talk about this evening because I just haven't been here long enough to be able to help you with that. But hopefully that'll change in the future. So I just want to kind of set the stage of what we're going to try to accomplish tonight to get through the public hearing, make sure that we close out the comments. I know a lot of the faces I see out there that folks came in advance, got copies. You know, I also checked through all the neighborhood meetings and so forth. And I know a lot of you have weighed in along the way. This has been going on, this public engagement of this plan for more than a year. So hopefully nothing that we talk about tonight is a surprise. So I'm going to turn that back over to Juliet to do her presentation.
Hello. Good. All right, so I don't have a visual presentation. I'm just gonna review briefly the plan, some of the process, and focus more on the goals portion of the plan, which to me is probably the more important section to focus on. But I do want to reiterate something that Susan said. POCDs, you know, typically are updated every 10 years because the process is lengthy and complicated and there's a lot of moving parts. But even if you updated one small section, that still counts as an update and will reset your 10-year clock. So one of the reasons I thought you may want to update your plan maybe sooner than later might be when the housing plan has to be readopted in 2026, I believe it is, if we adopted it in 2021, which I think we did. That gets updated every 5 years. So, you know, that might be one reason why you want to revisit this POCD again, but that does reset your clock too. So nobody should panic if this plan isn't exactly what you think it should be, because you can make smaller tweaks with your new planner versus trying to make a whole lot of changes tonight based on a few comments. I think that would be difficult. I first want to recognize the the POCD steering committee members. We had Bob Carlson, Christine Diaz before she left. Ed was the representative from planning and zoning, and I would also recognize Pat Lewis, who came to many of the meetings. Sal Terenzia, Bill Ricker for the Conservation Commission, and Stephanie Mastroianni for the Board of Ed. And then towards the end, we had a couple people that attended some of the meetings and weighed in when they wanted to. So I would thank them for their help. All right. Turn pages. All right, so this plan is your long range plan. It was developed from input from obviously me and my time here. I was with you for 8 out of the 10 years, of the last 10 years. And it reflects the consensus of the public input that we received. Now, I will make a note that the public input process, although it was extensive, just like last time, we had, several neighborhood meetings, focus groups that were online and in person. We had smaller community conversations. We had a visioning session. So we did do our part, but fewer people participated this time than last time, and most notably that a lot fewer people participated in the survey. So in 2013, you had almost 400 respondents of your survey, and this time you only had 200. So unfortunately, when you're trying to develop a plan, that makes it a little bit difficult because you aren't hearing from a very large segment of the population. But we did the best we could there. I also met individually with each of the Planning Zoning Commission, Economic Development Commission, and Conservation Commission, as they typically have big sections in the plan. The other thing I would note is that in the absence of an actual planner here during the time that I was writing your POCD, I remember I wasn't your actual planner, we didn't have the opportunity to really have a second planner weigh in or to do some of the things we did in 2013, where we hired a consultant to do a separate housing plan and a separate economic development plan. I mean, immediately before we did the POCD, which gave you all of your data analysis, so it made the POCD process a lot easier in that respect, because we had already done public input on economic development and extensive public input on housing. So you didn't have that luxury this time. The idea was this plan was supposed to be just an update, but the good news is that you adopted, or you implemented so much of your 2013 plan that it turned into be essentially a complete rewrite. You'll recognize some parts of it from 2013 with respect to cultural resources and natural resources, because those aspects didn't change a lot, but for the most part, a lot of it did change. As with all POCDs, you have to have a statement that they're consistent with the state plan of conservation and development. And here's where we have another little wrinkle in the operation, where the state has its current plan goes from 2018 to 2023. So that plan is still in effect, although it only covered till 2023, but the new plan starts in 2025 to 2030. So they're in this limbo period. The latest draft of the state plan was last updated in this month, March 2024. And so the guiding principles that you see in the last section of this draft of our POCD have been updated again, just fleshed out a little bit more. So it's hard to determine which one we should be consistent to, because they're very different things. So in 2013, there were growth principles that we were showing consistency with. This new plan of the state talks about guiding principles. So they're a little bit different. So I do feel that this plan is consistent with both. So I think we're fine with them both in there, recognizing that the new plan is still a draft and could change. I'm not sure how much it will change at this point, because they're getting towards the end of their public input process. So just to share the draft guiding principles, they're actually quite similar to ours. They're based on sustainability, resiliency, equity, and vibrancy. So and our sustainability, livability, progress that mimic the same sentiments. So I think we're good there. All right. The public input process itself, like I said, it had several components. To me, the most important one is the survey, because we had a lot of opportunities for people to write in their answers and give comments. That also makes it exceptionally challenging to try to summarize that data. But a lot of time was spent doing that. And the issues that were identified, I categorized, just like I did in 2013, into categories of affordability, preservation, rural character, fiscal responsibility and control, planning and sustainability, community and capacity building, economic development, education, threat to existing character or way of life, public safety and general nuisance concerns, and services, facilities, regulations, town policies, that kind of thing. And those were similar categories from last time, so I was able to make some comparisons between the data that we received. Again, remembering it was half the number of respondents, so not as representative as it could be. I thought our neighborhood meetings went quite well. Again, I love that format of a meeting. We had some good turnout for a lot of those, so about 106 people, well, 106 people attended, and nearly every board and commission was represented at those meetings. Some of them hosting the meetings and some there to listen and participate. The focus groups were on economic development, open space and conservation, and housing. And 42 residents participated in that. So some people went to, multiple meetings when they're on the same day. But our visioning session, I didn't write down the count of people there. Somebody remembers, I think it was probably around 50 people-ish, did you say? Was it 68? All right, so that was about the same as it was in 2013 then. And a lot of people there also participated in the community conversation on what to do with the school property that happened right after that. And then the POCD steering committee obviously met several times during that time period. All right, so one of the comments I did receive was about why do we have guiding principles or vision statements. And so I just wanted to speak to that a little bit if I can find my notes. All right, so I mean, guiding principles to me, this is your opportunity and your vision or opportunity to say, what it is that you want to do. This is your clear statement of your values, what's important to the town, what you want to protect, where you see yourself. It's your beginning statement. This is where we're going to start from, and this is where we hope to get. So the idea is that your guiding principles guide your decisions moving forward. So it brings focus to what's really important, and so that each one of your goals and your actions can get back to those important things that you've identified. And it's pretty key to developing goals, objectives, and actions. The mission statement provides that basis for judging the success of those goals and provides a direction when decisions are needed to be made, especially if you're faced with decisions that you're not used to making, that when you have to adapt to a new trend or a new public demand. So like I said, the town's mission statement does really tie in well to the existing state growth principles, and I think it works well enough to say that it's consistent with the draft guiding principles of the state plan. So with the vision and guiding principles and mission statements in mind, the results of the public input were analyzed and categorized, and those goals and objectives were developed. I will say that the categories of the goals remain the same from 2013 because we agreed in the visioning session that they were still relevant. So they were tweaked a little bit, but the overall goals, the goal categories are the same, and they were enhancing community, growing the economy, preserving the environment and rural character, and increasing housing choice and affordability. And then the other component of that, we took a lot of time in this process to identify the assets that the town identified as worth preserving, the assets that help define the character of North Stonington. Because of changes in statute, we were kind of forced to identify the physical characteristics of town that we want to preserve, because those are the things that applications you could use to deny an application versus the blanket statement that, oh, it doesn't fit in with the rural character or the character of town. You can't do that anymore. So we did take our time to identify the actual physical characteristics of what we were talking about that makes North Stonington what it is and what we want to preserve. So I think we accomplished that. Once we compiled those lists of assets that were worth preserving, they fell nicely into three categories of people, resources, and lifestyle. Lifestyle meaning quality of life and things like that. And then we asked in the neighborhood meetings, okay, well, if these are the things we want to preserve, how are we going to preserve them? And that's when all the suggestions came out and started to formulate those suggested actions that you found in the plan. So I tried to stay absolutely true to what I heard from you all at those meetings. I mean, they're direct quotes a lot of the times from just suggestions that you made. That doesn't mean you have to do any of them. They're just suggested actions. So one of the comments that I had gotten from the Planning and Zoning Commission was to make sure that it was understood that those are just suggested actions. That they, they're not things in a plan that an applicant can come in and say, well, your plan says that suggested action, so that must mean you want this, and our application is consistent with the POCD. That's not how that works. Those are just things you can pick and choose from, just so that the public understood that I heard them. I heard their suggestions, and I tried to fit them in under those categories of goals. If you all still feel strongly that you don't like that aspect of the plan or of that being in there, if it's, I tried to explain it right in the document too. I don't know if you saw that version, the red line version, where I'm saying these are just suggested actions. I put them in italic, green, so they stood out. You could also do kind of what we did last time and make a separate action plan. Remember, we had a separate document that sort of put them in a chart, and you could check off when they were completed and who was supposed to do them. So you could keep those suggested actions in a separate document if you want to, and shorten down the goal section to just have the main goal, the main objective, that's the ABCDs, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4s afterwards as being the broader strategies. So I'll leave that up to you when we deliberate, but that is something we could consider. So the 4 primary goals that we came up with, and like I said, they're pretty close to the ones in 2013, but tweaked a little bit. The first one being protect and strengthen the assets and abilities of the town and maintain our strong sense of community. The second one is diversify and grow the local economy. The third would be promote, protect, and enhance the natural resources, historical, architectural, and agricultural heritage of North Stonington as a fundamental part of the town's identity, tradition, quality of life, and prosperity. And that's probably the most important one. And then expand housing choice to accommodate the needs and residents of all ages. Like I said before, the Economic Development Commission and the Housing Commission and Conservation Commission typically all do their own plans. So we have Conservation Commission's plan that Bill will speak about later that is typically attached right to the end of this document. We had the housing plan that was adopted in 2021, but the EDC has not updated their 2012 plan, and so they may choose to do that, which might impact the economic development chapter of the plan and cause you to have to update it. All right, so that first goal, protect and strengthen the assets and abilities of the town and maintain our strong sense of community. So this is about building relationships and capacity. It's about being responsive and responsible with respect to governing, service provision, and planning. It's about creating opportunities for growth, whether that be personal growth or financial growth, which all tie into the issue of affordability. Being resilient, capable of adapting to disruptions like the pandemic, obviously, or the recession back in 2008. And protecting our water resources and other natural resources that allow the town to be more resilient, like protecting wetlands so you don't have as much flooding, and protecting the watershed and water quality. And it's about sustainability, both environmental and fiscal. So all of that goes into that first goal of protect and strengthen the assets and abilities of the town. So I'll just pull out. So some of the strategies there could be the main strategy is build relationships by creating more opportunities for civil and social engagement, social and civic engagement, as well as educational and recreational opportunities for all ages, capitalize on existing natural and recreational assets. How do we do that? Some things you could provide creative and consistent ways for residents to participate. You can have community gathering areas. You can use the internet better, so those are just simple strategies. Another overall objective is to protect residents and resources through responsive and responsible governing, staying informed and being inclusive. And one example of that, make North Stonington a livable, welcoming community for a diverse, multi-generational population. So those actions under there might speak to affordability. It might speak to having high school students participate in your boards and commission, encouraging them to participate. So, things like that. We talked about maintaining the current levels of service, because that is pretty important when you're trying to be deliberate in your planning process. You need to have a good planning staff and who has the resources to provide you with all of the information you need to make a decision. And when you talk about nuisance concerns like speeding and whatnot, you can't really address that in a POCD. That's difficult, but you can suggest in your POCD that the staffing level or the number of troopers is adequate to address some of these nuisances. And you can always encourage fiscal responsibility of all your boards and commissions as a goal there. Creating opportunities for growth. So we talked a lot about, affordability, especially affordable housing is a hot topic in this town. But we talked about, and I've talked about a lot of times, economic development to me is investment, whether you invest in your own property personally, you invest in yourself, you invest in, or a developer comes in and invests in town. So there's all different kinds of investment that can happen. And there's all different ways for a town to be affordable. So there might be this scenario where, we can't provide all of the affordable housing that we might need, right? But we could provide opportunities for people to generate income so that they can afford the house that they have. One example of that is allowing accessory apartments, which we do, or allowing home occupations, which we do. There's other ways to allow people to generate wealth so that they can pay their taxes and stay in town. So when we say affordability, it's a broader topic. It's not just housing. Obviously, speaking to sustainability, and under this, that first goal is developing plans to address the impact of climate change and severe weather events, which we've noticed in the past years are getting pretty intense when it comes to, say, rainfall and hurricanes and things like that. So that's something to that's important in your plan. So one of the goals or possible strategies there is to continue to support the actions of your sustainable CT committee. You can require different kinds of landscaping that better absorb stormwater. So there's a list of 6 possible strategies for you to consider. And again, in the first draft, if you choose to keep them there, there's a lot of actions that you can consider. The second one, diversify and grow the local economy. So again, development is a process aimed at improving the social and economic and environmental assets of your community. It's all 3 of those. So, growing and diversifying your local economy can mean increasing your amount of open space or your efforts in conservation, because you all define your community and what a successful community is. You get to define that. So not all towns think that we should develop every available piece of land. That part of growing this economy might be to expand the number of farms, because you're an agricultural town. So it shouldn't be a red flag when you hear economic growth, because that doesn't just mean commercial buildings. So the goal under this one is to basically set up the framework so that when an application or a suggestion comes in for growth, you're all set up with your tools in place to be able to easily process that application. So if you had concerns, let's say, over what developments look like or where they should be, and what kind of uses should be allowed, the framework that we're talking about is creating clear regulations, a clear path to review an application. You might consider things like design guidelines, or you might want to master plan a particular area that developers are going to want to develop, so you get ahead of those developers and you already are suggesting what you want to see there. So those are all things you can put in place to get ahead of the development and preserve the assets that you want to preserve in your town. So making sure you have staff, having marketing efforts so you're attracting the type of businesses that you want and not what you don't want. So that way, when you're deliberate in your planning process, the growth just occurs naturally at its own pace because you've already put all the things in place. You already fixed your regulations, so it has, you know, all of the uses that you don't want in the prohibited section and all of the uses that you do want allowable by site plan, so it's an easy process. Some of the uses that you're kind of unsure about, special permits, so you have, you know, more of a control. You can put all of those pieces in place. And that way you don't have to be so reactive to applications coming in. It'll work itself out. And again, this is where a vision is key. So if the vision is clear and the process is good and it's in place, then that vision becomes a reality. So your goal is to keep up on your regs, keep up on the trends, keep up on your open space and your concerns there, and make sure that those strategies and actions that you take continue to put those processes in place and the framework in place. So, like I said, maintaining flexibility in land use regulations is pretty key to adapt to changing trends, and to remain competitive, which you still need to work on your tax base, right? Keep your taxes low. You want to try to expand upon North Stonington's existing strengths and opportunities. So that might be, finding ways for businesses to work together, increase the cohesiveness there to make each one more prosperous. You can promote development tools and business services. You can pursue place-based development. So those are all strategies to build on the successes that we already have. I think it's always important to be proactive. If you're trying to preserve the character of your town that you feel very passionately about, it's key to be proactive versus reactive. You want to set the amount of open space you want and where you want it, which the Conservation Commission has done quite well. You want to determine where more dense housing would be okay. And because your vision is to maintain low density, let's say, but you have statutes and a housing crisis that are pushing you in another direction, well, then you can get out ahead of that and figure out where that would be okay so that you can preserve the areas that you don't want to see develop. You can preserve them. So that's a key example of being proactive versus having to fight things that come in that you may not want. Important to develop plans that I said, like I said, to address climate change, because I think the pandemic definitely pointed to issues of food security and how important that was and how important farming was to this community, because you had some local farmers that were able to provide food when grocery stores had none. Then our third goal, protect and promote and enhance the natural resources and historical and architectural heritage, that goal. North Stonington has consistently had a strong identity and a real capacity for growth, but has not been articulate and specific enough about its rural or unique character in a way that would effectively guide land use decisions. So, like I said, we spent a lot of time on that. I think we have a solid list of characteristics that you would be safe if you were faced with an application that really flew in the face of those characteristics, or threatened to, I don't know, take down all the stone walls and the trees. You've now mentioned them in your plan and hopefully in your regulations, so that you can protect the character that you hold dear. So some strategies under here, you want to try to ensure that all new development will be appropriate scale and design. Best way to do that, I guess, is design guidelines. I mean, that is the most effective way, or master plan areas. You want to work with developers and encourage them to incorporate elements of the town historic past. You can think about creative ways to use some of your existing historic buildings, so in a more creative way that is still profitable for whoever just bought it, so that they aren't taken down. The school building is another example of reusing assets that you have. You can limit the number or prohibit uses that will contribute to the undesired increase in traffic or road widening, light pollution, or Madeline's favorite, light pollution and noise pollution. So, you know, be bold. You can go into your zoning regs and prohibit every horrible use that you can think of. That's okay. If that's what you don't want in your town, put it in your regs and it won't come. You can consider blight ordinances and noise ordinances. They have their challenges, but some blight ordinances work quite well. And then of course, encouraging people to participate in other meetings like Board of Selectmen meetings, as they might have more control over things like traffic and speed bumps and sidewalks and things like that. Engaging in the planning process. I know that's a challenge in every town, you know, trying to find members to join boards and commissions, but more so trying to get the public to come out and participate. It is challenging and it's not unique to this town by any stretch. A lot of people don't want to engage in the planning process, this traditional planning process of coming to a meeting and hearing a presentation and all of that. They don't want to do it that way. A lot of the comments happen on social media now, and it's hard for staff or elected officials to keep up on all of those comments and try to figure out ways to incorporate it into the process. So that's going to be a challenge. And then the last goal, expanding housing choice to accommodate the needs of all residents and incomes. Obviously, housing is the #1 focus of everything in the state these days. And it is important in this region where we are experiencing a bit of a housing crisis because of the number of workers that have come into the region for EB, and also the demographic shift of away from three to 4 person households down to 2 or fewer. So the number of single person households has increased dramatically. That's what's really sort of put a strain on the housing, because now where a couple lived in one house, they live in 2 separate houses. So it's like all of us overnight needed to double our housing stock. And it was a very short 10-year time frame that the average household size moved from 3.42 to 2. That's a big change. And that has put some strain on a lot of towns. Again, best way to deal with that, since it is a sensitive issue here, is to get out ahead of it and figure out ways that you can make your goals, your 10% goal, so you're not subject to predatory development. Especially, I learned today, I had an application come before us, and I think you might have had one too, that mobile home parks, new mobile home parks, which no towns technically allow, are being proposed under 830G developments. And that's pretty scary to me. So that should be a little bit more of an incentive to try to get to that goal quickly, so that we don't see them popping up everywhere. So this housing section speaks to the state principle of ensuring a high quality of life and opportunity for all people. And it also speaks to the sustainability principle of balancing the need for new development or housing without compromising the future. So I tried to stay, I didn't have to do a lot of work in this section because you just adopted your housing plan. So I just incorporated, a lot of the same goals and strategies there. So and I'm going to go back in a second and go over some of the changes in statute, but so in these goals, I do talk about, to Brian's point in his comments to me, about the importance of educating potential home buyers about CHFA loans and FDA loans, because folks who buy their houses with those types of mortgage, that counts towards your points towards a moratorium. It doesn't count towards your, overall percentage of deed restricted housing per se, but it counts. It's working in the right direction. So that's important. And then we have done, this town has done a fantastic job about allowing affordable housing, accessory apartments. So you are promoting housing that is affordable. We just have to figure out a way to get to to get more qualified affordable housing, so you're not facing very dense developments that you may not want. In this section, I am going to take out one of the strategies. It's number 6 under E. It just is very similar to another one that's a little bit farther away, just so you know. That's on the other page. So convert naturally affordable housing into qualified affordable units. That's in another goal on the next page. And of course, important in housing is building your capacity to implement housing initiatives. You have a group keeping North Stonington affordable, and your Affordable Housing Committee, both working on those goals. So partnering with those two groups to get to your housing goals will be important. I just want to go back 1 minute and just talk about the data a little bit. So as we were doing this plan, of course, we were counting on the 2020 census data being finished and available and accurate, and that absolutely didn't happen because of the pandemic. So there's a real blip in the data. And so for a while, all the data sources were sort of reflecting incredibly different data for the same time period. So it was hard to determine which data to use. So that is a little bit of an issue. And then the impact that the pandemic had was swift, and then some of those impacts went away as quickly as they came. So it's just very difficult in the time frame between 2020 and 2022 to determine what happened. So it also makes identifying trends a little bit difficult. So this would also be another case for updating that section of your plan in probably about 3 years when everything levels back out again and maybe all of the census data is available and a little more accurate. So that if you looked at the data, the margins of error for all of these were significant, and not a whole lot I could do about that. So you should be aware of that. But it's a fairly good representation. I tried to take from different sources. So Sector gave us analyses, and I used CIRC, which I've forgotten what they're called now. Advanced CT, the town profile. This is something for the commission to also consider. That the data that went into it is in this separate document. I didn't want to dump it all into the book itself. There's quite a bit, but I would suggest that it be just available online. So I assume this plan will live somewhere on the internet. You have your POCD, and then you would have your data appendices in the back. So we'll print out a few for you all, but it does show, I tried to take from as many different sources as I could find, and they're all in here. I've also included the summaries of the focus groups, the lengthier summaries of the focus groups and the survey and the neighborhood meetings in this document. So I would just recommend that it live online somewhere next to the POCD document. I do have for you a brand new clean copy of the plan itself. The maps were done by Jessica Cobb at the Council of Governments, and I did have she finished, cleaning up all the little last minute mistakes and taking off the word draft and fixing the legend. So they're all complete and too big of a file to sort of send off to you ahead of time. It's enormous. So, but I will have this available. I'll give it to Cheryl, and she can, make sure everybody sees this, but this is the final version. I also received comments from a few folks here in the audience, and I incorporated them as best I could. They came in kind of late, but all of the PCRL comments I did put in, Bill. And for the most part, I tried to get in as many as I could. One change since your red line version, I did decide to take out the bit about the 2019 strategic plan. I think that was a comment of yours, Pat. So I did take that out. I took out some direct quotes from the survey, and cleaned up some of the language throughout, tightened it up because some people said it was too long. I know I'm wordy, but so I did try to tighten down certain areas, but not changing the substance of that section. So I hopefully have addressed the major concerns, and then some of the concerns, like I said to Brian, there were some comments that about the housing section that's what your strategic plan is for. That's what you put in your plan. I have to take the higher view of it. So, and I don't want to go against the plan that's already in place. So you know, some of the strategies, I tried to get most of them in here, but you want to flesh that out in your own housing plan. And same with economic development. They might have a different strategies and actions that they come up with together as a group, because that's the job they're tasked with. So, I will step aside now, and I guess the process would be to accept comments, and I'll write them down. Oh, and before we do that though, Bill is going to get up and talk about the PCRL, the Plan of Conservation and Recreation Land.
I do want to thank the steering committee, particularly those folks who worked so hard over the past year to come up with this document. Doing double duty, I also want to recognize the Conservation Commission, who for the past 2 years have been working on this last chapter of the Plan of Conservation and Recreation. It includes Bob DeGorsey, who is here tonight, Dr. Steve Colgan, Monica Dumont, Doug Farron, Josh Strunk, and Dr. Arnie Vlieks. The mission of the Conservation Commission is for the development, conservation, supervision, and regulation of natural resources, including water resources, within its territorial limits. It's with these regulations in the ordinance that we offer this chapter to the 2023 POCD. I start and end with one overwhelming need we have for our town, a need which surpasses our economic development, a need more important than our roads and infrastructure, a need which even surpasses our desire to have excellent schools and sound health and safety facilities. Our overwhelming need and concern is the protection of our environment, our land, our water, our air. This is the most critical aspect of this report. Without our protecting the environment in which we live, we have a town devoid of the necessary ingredients for a healthy life. The townspeople strongly express their desire to retain and protect rural living and its natural resources. We wanted to protect our waters and rich farmlands. Careful planning, regulation, and enforcement in harmony with economic development can preserve what we have and what we seek to enhance as we continue to grow as a town. Our third largest town and area in the state is dominated by two extensive watersheds. They are identified in your material on page 20, looking like this. It's the Chinook River watershed and the Green Falls River watershed. Combined, they cover approximately 60% of our town. Nearly all our lakes, ponds, streams, and tributaries feed these two rivers before entering the 2018 newly designated Wild and Scenic River, the Pawcatuck. These rivers run through parts of the largest aquifer in the state, the aquifer that the majority of our residents in the central and eastern portion of our town depend upon for their clean well water. Town support for weed control in our three major lakes, for them to continue to provide year-round active and passive recreation opportunities, is a necessary component of our mission to conserve and supervise our water resources. Protecting all of these lakes, streams, and ponds, all these water resources is of paramount importance to the health of our town, to our region, and indeed to our state. The land. Although it appears we have conserved open space everywhere in town, you can but drive down any road and see Avalonia or the Nature Conservancy signs or the North Stonington Citizen Land Alliance signs or our own conservation easement signs. But only 8% of our land is permanently protected. Permanently protected. 54% is temporarily protected, which includes Patchogue Forest and our farm and forest land. One of our goals as a commission is to increase the amount of permanently protected land, especially within the 3 Greenway wildlife corridors. The smaller western corridor lies from Northwest Corner Road, the Tri-Town Preserve, down through Lake of Isles, Lantern Hill, Winnechaug Hill Preserve properties, and on to the Assaconk Wildlife Management Area behind the gymatorium. The central corridor is made up primarily of Patchogue Forest, conservation properties on Ryder Road, the 3 major lakes, and Hewitt Farm. The eastern corridor travels along the Green Falls River from Voluntown down to the Pawcatuck. It includes Bell Cedar Swamp, added in 2013, the Sam Cody Preserve, newly added Sheets Family Preserve, the newly protected United States-owned fish and wildlife property, as well as the development rights protected by the Learned Bill and Trillium Farms. In increasing these Greenway wildlife corridors, we have identified 19 properties we would like to acquire. Acquire does not mean purchase, for the town does not have the extensive amount of money that it would cost to acquire 19 properties, but properties that could be gifted to either private organizations, conservation easements, protected land which the landowners have loved for so long. Since the 2013 Plan of Conservation and Recreation Land, where similar properties were identified, at least 3 major parcels on Miller Road, Ryder Road, and Putka Road, as well as the fish and wildlife property, have been permanently protected and added. Although the town's designated land acquisition fund has had been given spotty attention over the decade, the option for developers to pay fee in lieu of open space will allow the town to acquire more desirable land for recreation and conservation when it becomes available. The Hewitt Farm was partially purchased in this manner in 2008. Recreation opportunities have been a priority of the Conservation Commission since the 2013 POCD, when they identified passive recreation as a major goal. Trails have been developed on every town-owned property that would allow a trail. Hangman Hill, Winnechaug Hill, Stewart Hill Preserve, as well as the Billings Lake, Assaconk Borderland trails, have all been developed with heavily utilized trails. Doubled during the pandemic, I might add. Doubled in their usage, I might say. Our Conservation Commission took the lead with 3 other towns in securing a property on the Pawcatuck River and developed with those 3 other towns a kayak canoe trail going from Ashaway all the way down to Donahue Park in Westerly. Since the development of the historic hiking trail along Main Street, identifying the historic homes, trolley lane, Baptist and Congregational churches, town hall, town green, bicentennial Charter Oak, several guided school classes of middle schoolers and high schoolers have learned firsthand the history of North Stonington. One of the major goals identified both by the state and our Conservation Commission is protecting our historic resources. Soon to be added, following the continued desire for additional recreation opportunities recommended in the focus groups of our 2023 visioning sessions, will be a biking trail map of suggested routes around town, and if the DEEP grant is awarded, an ADA wheelchair accessible trail and the Assagont Borderlands Trail. The trails not only give our public open space, vistas, woodlands, and passive recreation opportunities, all of which they have asked for during our planning sessions, but it allows them to witness our commitment to preserve our history and our rural character. This is what our public has consistently asked for. What are our goals for the next 10 years? I was on the 2013 POCD and on this 2023. Forgive me, I will not be on the 2033. But our goals leading up to that are 5 in number. We wish to maintain our rural character. We wish to permanently protect our water resources. We want to protect our natural and historic resources. We want to provide active and passive recreation opportunities. And lastly, to improve our regulatory procedures and prioritize our land acquisitions. As we began our chapter, so do I end it. The protection of our environment is the most critical aspect of this report.
I also wanted to draw your attention to the future land use map that's in front of you. The last section of the plan is your plan. That map is essentially the POCD plan, and it identifies planning opportunity areas and a possible second sewer district that the WPCA plan, which I'm not sure if you've seen or where that is in its process, is contemplating. So that's the plan in front of you. Document itself, you'll see that there are 3 planning opportunity areas. They're in the same location as they were in the 2013 plan. I took off the planning opportunity area in the resort commercial district, although there are obviously some opportunities for development in that area, especially if a sewer district is established. But those are the last pages of your plan. And that, again, these are just ideas that were coming to mind of possible uses for the vacant parcels that are there, and reuses for the buildings, and possible ideas about landscaping, and to bring focus to, like, say, the exit 93 area, the interchange where the truck stop is, and the liquor store, that whole area, just ways you could envision it. These aren't set in stone, obviously, but they're just ideas for those planning opportunity areas. So didn't want to leave that out. And then the plan of conservation and recreation land also has their own version of their future desired parcels map. I did do this whole for the ease of printing because of the layout. I did put all of the maps and all of those planning opportunity areas at an 8.5 by 11. One possible suggestion, since the future land use map and the PCRL maps, a little bit hard to read in the 8.5 by 11 version. The last page of those plans can have a folder, and you could have the 11 by 17 map folded up in there, or even a larger one. And then, of course, the plan will live online. And Jessica from the COG has given us an 8.5 by 11 and 11 by 17 version, and in some cases a 24 by 36, so that you could really zoom in and get some details. So they'll still be accessible, but I think since most things live online now and we don't want to have to print a ton of these, for ease of printing, I've converted everything in this document to 8.5 by 11.
Oh, that would be lovely. Because, is it on? Is it on? Yeah, it is. Okay, Juliet, I could not hear a lot of what you said because that's my ears. So I hope you can hear me. Bill, thank you. That was wonderful. This sounds like a good town. I think I'll stay. Because it makes it look very good. And I think just to bring up the quarterly, what's written in the first page is beautiful. So I went here, I'm like all over. I went through the copy of the POCD and some of my comments I wrote to Susan, and they'll get in there, I'm sure, because they're nickel dime typos and things. But I have some things I want to say separately. I'm concerned that the emphasis could be on tourism. And I think that could ruin us too much. There was a time when we didn't even want North Stonington on the tourism maps that Mystic was providing. We are there now, and I know the vineyards and some of the farms and things could benefit from having tourism, but be careful, because Mystic is in the process of expanding where tourism can go, because they're getting so crowded in Mystic. And I'm sure that means they have their eyes on North Stonington. And I just urge us to be careful. Maybe limit where big buses can go, like, and I can't remember the name of the road that goes right from my house up to Stonington Institute. Maybe say the buses can't go beyond the Mashantucket's entry to their property, because sometimes things get told to go there if they say take the shortest route, and then they get up to Northwest Road and the corner road and they can't turn around. So there might be some roads you don't want buses on or something like that, but just be careful of tourism. There were two places where the divide in town was mentioned. And given the divide that is in the country, I sort of hate to see that word applied to North Stonington. But according to Bob Carlson, indeed, there is one on where we want our housing. But that is, in this day and age, that's kind of a touchy word. If there's a more tactful way to say it, maybe you can. Or maybe we aren't that divided that you have to call it that. I don't, that's just a personal thing. Now I have a couple of comments that refer to Avalonia's properties, and I'm not authorized to say this, but it's what I see. You mentioned the Sheets property as though the town had something to do with that. They did not. That's our own. It was a gift to us that we managed. And I'm not sure it needs to be mentioned as one that's called out without having Avalonia's name attached to it, or calling out some of the other properties in town. That was on page 19 of the original copy. Another one that deals with Avalonia is on page 81, where you're talking about hikes and bikes on trails and things like that. And that there, you mentioned Avalonia's Tri-Town property. And I don't think that's appropriate to call it out by name and to sort of have plans for it. We are not a recreation commission. We are a land protection and wildlife protection organization. That's on page 81 of the original issue. It talks about hikes and bikes on trails. It's, I can't tell you what. I'll get to it just a minute. 60, 81. Page 81, 2D. 2D1I. It says, continue to develop more bike and pedestrian trails to connect various areas of town. Consider developing a pathway along the old trolley route and more trails like the Tri-Town Trail. When I asked at the town hall, it sounded as though it was our Tri-Town. It's because she mentioned Miller Road, and that's where we are. Oh, it's having trouble getting through the reservoir. Okay. Okay. Because what I got from town hall was perhaps our trail, and then I didn't think that was appropriate that you make plans for our trail. Okay, good. I also, on page 83, question the value of the 10 mil program anymore. Do we really want to use that, or is that not being? Yeah, so I wouldn't mention it if it's trying to be phased out. It got Anna quite in trouble because she did the first 25 years and they upped her for another 25, so it was 50. Or 50 and it went to another 50. I just don't think you want to put any more into it. Well, then don't mention it as however you mentioned it there. Maybe anyway. And I have to take issue with Mr. Ricker. I'm not sure the existence of the Charter Oak has been verified successfully. But not to somebody else's satisfaction. That's up to you. That's it. Thank you. I can't hear you.
90, the transfer of development rights and that.
And when you talk about putting things in deeds to preserve things, that's kind of touchy because we've got an ambulance building that we can't use because the restriction on that, it has to be used for only public purposes or something. So that can, 20, 50 years from now, that can cause you troubles.
Yeah, that's a private decision that this commission doesn't have any say over. Are people going to come up here?
Gary Nino, 91 Main Street, North Stonington. Waiting for my phone. Yeah. Gary Nino, 91 Main Street, North Stonington. How are you, Ann? Just a couple of comments. As a matter of process, I don't understand how some of these things got introduced into the POCD. You know, what impacted my neighborhood? I tried to make sure I made every meeting, but there are things in there that impacted my neighborhood that I don't know how they got added, so I'm a little confused by that. To get to the overarching statement about we're behind schedule and need to submit this, as I've told the Board of Selectmen in the past, we always have the time to do what's right. So my suggestion is rather than rush and put this in and make it final, we make sure we all agree with it, because I know what happens. Once this comes in, everyone starts referencing it's in the approved POCD, therefore it's de facto, and we drive forward. And I take exception to some of the stuff that's in here. So looking at that, what was the process for things to be introduced? Did they only come in from surveys and the village meetings or the community meetings, or how did things get introduced? Specifically, page 71 and 72 talks about an expansion of a parking lot behind the town hall. We've moved all the heavy usage of the town hall into this building when we decided to keep it, because we have this great facility that can house all of us. So why do we need a bigger parking lot in the village? That's one. And then there's a bigger parking lot to go on the backside of this building. And I don't understand why. It's an R40 zone. It's a school. It's supposed to be secondary use unless the library changed their deed, which I haven't heard they've changed yet. So why do we need more parking? We got a lot of asphalt around this building. Why do we need more parking here? It's not a far reach from this town to have Route 2, which is still relatively bucolic, to turn into Route 12. It would be, anyway. Sorry, I'm ranting. Does the town have control of this document? So going forward, the next 10 years, do we have this document, the POCD, in a form that we control and own so we can revise it in the future, or is it held with the consultant that provided this? Okay, that's a good answer. And I think that's it. Go ahead.
The parking lots were ideas that were floated around to address some of the nuisance issues that were raised about traffic in the, or inadequate parking in the village because of Chinook River Brewery. So it was an idea of where could we fit another parking lot that wouldn't impact the character of the village. And so that those are just potential renderings. They're not written in stone. And then the selectman had the one drawn up for here. I wasn't a part of that, so he'll have to address that. And then so yes, the most of the things that came in here, 99% of the things that came in here were a result of the survey, some of the written responses in, not just the tabulated responses, the neighborhood meetings, the meetings with the individual boards and commissions, the focus groups, community conversations. So, you know, it's all mixed in. And like I said in the beginning, not a wide variety of, or you know, not a lot of people participated. So yes, some things may have only been mentioned once or twice, but I didn't want to betray the people that did bother to show up and not include it. So again, a lot of these are suggestions. They're not, nobody can, you know, you can't force an application through because of a suggestion. These are just ideas to consider. And yes, you will have.
So what bothers me about the parking lots is it's in the transportation section. There's no linkage of the narrative to those two documents. It's just sort of planted in there. And if this document gets approved as it is, then here we go again. People say, well, it's in the POCD. Why can't we do it? I have a problem with this. Thank you.
I wanted to respond a bit, Gary, to the 2013 POCD, where there was a rendering that was in it. I can't recall the pages, but it talked about the intersection of Route 49 and 184, and how something might be able to be done with that problem area. Based on that, the Conservation Commission took it upon themselves to raise money all private money. Thank you, Madeline Jeffrey, for a large amount. The whole group, in order to turn a waste piece of property, state land, into a little pocket park, trying to dress up that area. It didn't have to be done. It was a recommendation in the 2013 POCD, but we decided to take action on it. And I would think that this might be a similar thing with talking about parking lots. It doesn't have to be done, but it was a rendition that something might be done or could be done if indeed the town fathers and mother wishes to move forward with it.
If we're gonna add a blurb, is this on? Doesn't matter. If we're gonna add a blurb, can we have it as might be or could be considered, but not de facto gonna be parking in the, I don't understand why the village could possibly need more parking if we've used this building for our large meetings and the town hall hours are relatively limited. I don't understand why there's a concern about parking in the village. I really don't.
Brian Rathbun, 263 Grindstone Hill Road. I'm very concerned about this. I'm not the type of guy that likes to be pushed against a wall, and that's what I feel that will being done. I just got this the other day and I haven't even had a chance to really go through it all. I'd like to say a few things about the housing in the 830G that Connecticut wants us to have, well, they put into effect. They put it back in 1989. And we've had since 2013, we learned that 10% is not carved in stone. It was just a measure which the towns could be exempt from the Appeals Act when a developer comes in, because a developer, as you know, can bypass our zoning laws if we don't have the 10%. Imaginary 10%. There's 169 towns in Connecticut. In 2021, there's 31 towns that could comply to that law. Most of them were the big cities. 2022, there was 29 towns that could comply. 2023, there was 28 that could comply. I believe that would be because of the moratorium. They couldn't get up to their 10%, so they're back off the list. Now, I would think that the state of Connecticut would look at that and say, wow, we got 169 towns. We only can get maybe 31 to comply. We got a problem here. This is clearly not working. So what do? Well, I can tell you right now that I'm also a guy that kind of digs into things. And they got some bills up in Hartford that if they go through, we won't even need a zoning board. Some of the bills they call a fair share, HB 5473, HB 5474, and HB 5475 is being considered. And a lot of them in there say, let's see, they call it as of right, which means if they come before the board, a zoning board, then there's no public hearing. Well, I would think that the zoning board would want to hear the public's opinion on a developer's proposals. When I was looking at this plan here, and what I'm not gonna stay up here forever, although I probably could, but see, that was the big cities. Okay. I think I started on page 51. There we go. Getting better. First thing I noticed on 51 was it said the senior center be available to residents for rental for activities. Well, it is. I do believe it's been on our site. And I think it was $50 a fee to rent that hall. On page 55, I didn't understand what the underlying part meant. I'm not a big fan of this. The pandemic did this and the pandemic did that. It's over. When I was a kid, we had all kinds of things. Hong Kong flu and all that stuff. We got through it. I never heard a word about it from anybody else. But I don't think we need that in our plan of conservation and development. Okay, does it? Okay. All right. Well, that's what I wondered. I mean, like I say, I've got this just a couple of days ago, and right. And when I went online, it was so small. This old man couldn't see it. Page 56. I think I hit that already. All right, there are some things there. They want us to address regulations that hinder private developers. Well, I think the up in Hartford thinks that we can't regulate our own town. That's what I feel. I mean, our board members we have here, I know most of them, if not all of them. And they're people who've been in this town for a long time. And we're going to have somebody from Hartford that sits up there and hasn't even been down to North Stonington tell us what we got to do with housing. We heard Bill Ricker say about we have aquifers. To me, we should be able to have exemptions. And I'm sure all these other towns that can't make the imaginary 10%, I'm sure they got reasons why they can't make it. Affordability says in here, North Stonington's housing wage is $24.12. Well, I think minimum wage is $15 an hour. So if you got two people in a house working for $15 an hour, they're making $30 an hour. Seems like they're pretty affordable to me because I make a heck of a lot less than that. And I'm still here. Page 57. We want the volunteers, our EMTs, the firemen, the public work crews, the teachers, and thank you, Juliet, for putting a little thing in for the CHFA because they do offer special rates exactly for those people. I know it's for first-time home buyers, or if you haven't owned a house in 3 years. Page 58 went on to say about fixed incomes. Well, we got a lot of us on here on fixed incomes. I did see somewhere in here where it said equality. I hear equality, equality. I have never seen North Stonington welcome more people in our town without prejudice or anything else. After all, I'm here. On page 60, I don't know if we really need to put dollar figures in there, simply because if this is for 10 years, 10 years from now, those dollar figures could either go up or they could go down. I've seen a lot of things in here, and I didn't mark them on every page. But I see the reference to sewer and water, sewer and water, sewer and water. I've been at quite a few meetings that they wanted us to connect the sewer or water. And I don't think our residents really want any sewer or connect to any other town with sewer or water. We have the best water in the world. We supply them other towns with the water. The sewer, I think we're asking for trouble if we get sewer lines in North Stonington, because I've read about the sewer lines in Stonington. I believe Westerly had problems. It's not a cheap operation. I see all these pages here, and then I see this page that Julie gave us here. I feel our POCD should be about this size, straight to the point. So people in Hartford doesn't have to guess, or whoever's going to have this thing. I also believe that if we approve it and send it to Hartford, that will be the Bible that I will have to go to a meeting and hear somebody say, well, it's in the POCD. The worst thing that we could do, because we're taking it right out of our own hands and giving it away. And I really do trust our zoning board. And I know we got farmers, we got machinists, and they got people I know. I trust the people I know. I don't trust the people I don't know until I've talked to them for a while. Then I can trust them. Especially when they start telling me about the town that I live in. Do they want to listen to us about our town? Then they should come through that door. They should be here at the meeting tonight. And I agree, we got to educate people on affordability of houses. We got to give them the proper way to go through, just like we had to. We didn't get right out of high school and buy a house. We got a credit rating up. We got to educate them, maybe through our schools, to how to go about the process of buying a house. CHFA, they can go right on that thing and they will guide you right through the proper process, even if you don't use them. So anyways, the only other thing I gotta say is I know our Conservation Commission works hard. But I feel that they're putting too many trails into our town. Farmers have said they want to be left alone. I've already had bicycles coming up my driveway. I was never asked about that stuff. I certainly had a say in it, but I believe when we started Conservation Commission back in the years, we were told we had to have set aside when we built buildings in clusters so the animals that were displaced would have a place to live and go. As soon as you start having people walk around these trails with their dogs, those animals leave. And that's one of the reasons I moved here. Well, my mother and father moved here, I should say. They love the country, they love the wildlife. My father loved the hunt. So I'm not sure this plan of conservation and development is really giving a total accurate feeling of our town, because I know I have other people that agree with me. Farmers always tell me, we just want to be left alone. And they don't want to be have people walk around and watch them sweat out in those fields. That's all I got to say for now. And I urge the zoning board to really look at that if they're going to have a vote tonight. We got till 31st, midnight. Thank you.
Bob Carlson, 241 Northwest Corner Road and 40 Main Street. Figured I'd mention both since I spend the equal amount of time in both locations. So Gary, I want to answer your questions. It's about 2 parking lots and a deed restriction. The library board has voted to remove the word secondary and just use the word education. The lawyer has not got around to make that deed restriction change, but it has been voted on by the board. So that's where we are with that. Secondly, so how did the parking lots come about? Those same people, Gary, that are your neighbors that wanted speed humps in your town, and we listened to as a Board of Ed, usually got a phone call on a Friday morning after a certain particular performer performs at Chinook Brewery on a Thursday night. Typically from the same people that wanted the speed humps, telling me that they've got cars parked in their grass, 2 wheels on the grass, 2 wheels on the road. The fire company calls and says they can't get a fire truck through. There's a main municipal parking lot across from the town hall that has access to water for a fire truck. They can't get through because there's too many cars parked in the way. And parking in general is a problem. I've got WPCA members who show up on a Thursday night, and if they don't have ample parking, they turn around and go home and there's no meeting. So parking is an issue in the town. If the library, the Historic Society, the brewery, 298 building, if there's all these things going on at once, there's an issue. So we looked at possible parking, and one of the ones we looked at behind Town Hall seemed like it would make the most sense because it's a fairly small parking lot. It would add about 18 cars and it'd be behind the Town Hall. So it really wouldn't be that visible. So again, the same people we listened to about the speed humps are the people that call me on Friday morning to say, we have a problem because so-and-so played at the brewery last night and you couldn't get through with trucks, you couldn't get through with cars, and people were parking on lawns. So that's how that parking lot was just an idea. And that's all, as Julia said, it was a thought of doing something that might enhance parking in our village. We don't want to turn the village into something else. We like it when you visit Mystic or Wickford, Rhode Island and come home to our village. We don't want to become somebody else's village, but if we can add 18 cars, it would make a lot of sense and probably make a lot of your neighbors happy. As far as the parking lot here, so I know that you have an issue with this building. We didn't know what this building was going to become when we built the schools across the street. We knew there was going to be a central office in this building, but that's all we knew. Since then, this town's done a remarkable job of turning this into a meeting area, which we can set up all the time, which Susan will tell you in other towns that they don't have this. They have to go into school auditoriums and school cafeterias and set up a meeting. We leave this set up all the time. We have multiple meeting rooms in here that we use all the time. We rent out as in revenue for the town to an early learning center in the 2-story wing that we didn't have that tenant when we first took over this building. So not only do we have the central office and we have other storage and school use in this building, we did early voting in this building. We do regular voting in this building. So there's a lot of The town should be proud that we took this building, did not have to build it. Don't put relatively a ton of money into it. It provides revenue. And it's actually a really nice place to come and have a meeting like this. The problem is that the secret's out that it's closer to come in that door than that door. So we only have so many spots over here. Today, I had to make sure that 4 spots are left open for early voting because we do have the early learning center and some of the people that work in the central office park over here. So there was a thought about putting a 45-car parking lot on this back side of the building, which would make sense because now you could use it for voting. We use this particular door for elderly and handicap voting. It's also a drop off for the early learning center. As again, it's a meeting space for us. And I'll bet you that most people at night go back out that door rather than walk down the hallway and go through the other door. So it makes sense to put a well-lit small parking lot on this side of the building. Again, these are just thoughts. These are ideas on how we can enhance what we're doing without changing the look of the village. And I don't think that a small parking lot here and a small parking lot behind the town hall would be so devastating. Now, I wonder what it was like when the Wheeler home burnt down and they made the municipal parking lot across from town hall, because that was one of the most beautiful homes in town. And it burnt down. They turned it into a parking lot. But there was a lot of people back in that day that did not want to see a parking lot go where that house burnt down. Yet there's a parking lot there today. So things happen, things change. We try to do the best we can. And these are just some of the ideas we came up with. Juliet put them in the POC to be at least contemplated before we do any parking in the village. And we have parking now where we did the demolition. Another thing that people in the village wanted to see. We will have some sort of a community conversation on all the parking in the village and where it makes the most sense. We got a person in town that came to our last Board of Select meeting, came up with a parking plan to close Main Street, make a cul-de-sac at the end over near the Red Onion and have parking up and down Main Street. So there's a lot of thoughts out there. I think if we do something, it would have to make sense and everyone would kind of have to be on board. I expect that not everybody's going to agree with everything we come up with. Heaven knows we know that not everybody agree with putting speed humps in, but everyone does agree with the fact that slow down speeding. So we can't please everybody, but we try to do the best we can. And that's how those ideas in those 2 parking lots came up. So just so I give you some clarification. Thank you.
A long night and we're all tired, but I don't understand how the process works. I went to the meetings that impacted my community. I listened to every comment. And these things show up in page 71 and 72, completely unlinked to anything else in the document that shows a significant amount of macadam added to the village. It just doesn't make sense how this works and impacts our community without telling us. To me, tonight is as important as any part of what this great team has put together to this point. The community should be aware that if we put it in the POCD, even if it's just an idea, we all know what happens. People stand up here and say, well, it's in the POCD, you can't say no. And that should not be the de facto, not without involvement from the community, awareness from the community. So I hear you, Bob. I support the use of the school. I think it's great. Though I will say this school was unsatisfactory for further use as a school. And yet conservatively, the school and the Board of Education and the central office are using more than 50% of the asset they left behind. And that falls on the taxpayer. So let's really not go down that rabbit hole. And the last piece of it is, and this is going to go to Madeline, these lights never turn off, ever. I mean, what in the old days when there was a school and they were worried about kids breaking in or graffiti on the walls, okay, we left the walls on. The school has moved over there. We still have the lights on all night here. Why? Sorry. You open the door.
Does anyone on the board? Yeah, you got it cranked up. You have a question?
I got a couple questions,
Okay.
but I don't know if they're questions or if they can be addressed afterwards, but the picture you have of the store, the village store, the brewery, was before the bridge was rebuilt, because the end of that building shows up. Well, there's a couple pages in there where the brewery, village store, whatever it used to be. The picture of the cafe, where it used to be the cafe in the village store where the brewery is, that section of it fell off in the flood. Yeah, it shows up in the pictures. Right now, the bridge is there instead of, it might even be in the beginning of it. There's a number of pictures, a couple of them anyway. It might have, be good to have a new picture in there that shows, there's one even of the Chinook River, and it shows, the red building in the back, and it still has the section on it where they had the cafe, but really that fell off and they built the bridge there. So that was something I think it's, I have some questions about the possible actions to consider under diversify and grow the local economy. You say that most of these things came from things that you heard, but I went to all these meetings and there's some possible actions in there that I never heard at all. So I'm quite confused as to, are these things that we really need to consider?
Again, there was a lot of written in comments, a lot of other meetings that you weren't at, that I might have met with certain commissions or people coming in on a Friday and talking to me. I mean, there's conversations that occur, but I was pretty true to, I was 100% true to what I heard or read in the public comments that I received. So they did come from either a written comment or a spoken comment. Those the activities in particular, those are all direct quotes from people. I promise they are all direct, compiled from a list that I grabbed out off of the neighborhood meetings primarily and the survey, written in responses. But again, like I had offered in the beginning, if you don't want those actions printed in this document, right, you can have them printed in another document. They're just things you can pick and choose if you want to try to implement some of these goals. You can ignore them completely. I, as the consultant, didn't want to ignore the comments I read or heard because I felt that would be inappropriate. So you don't have to have them in here. You can put them in a separate document. That's up to you.
Well, I think some of the issues are that there were so few responders who filled out the surveys.
I know.
200 compared to the number of residents we have in town. And to come up with some of these actions, and to be only made by one or two people or whatever, to me, those are totally statistically insignificant.
I did make sure they correlated to one of the, categories. And if I had a suggestion that didn't fit in anywhere, no, that didn't go in. But if it vaguely related to some of the bigger categories that were more agreed upon, then I just put it in. But yeah, you're right. You don't, again, they're not mandatory though.
I mean, even 200 probably isn't statistically significant. And then when you get down to nitty gritty about this person said that and this person said that, I mean,
There's no other way I can write the plan. I mean, I'm sorry.
well, also, I think there are a number of places where I think you should have indicated numbers, either the total numbers of the survey responders or the percentages, because you've got numbers in there, like on the goals and objectives, and then on page 57 about the affordable housing. So are there 200 responders, or was that a percentage of the responders? And page 50, again, I don't know if it's a total or a percentage.
I did try to go back and add those, so I don't know if I missed a few.
So I think it's kind of confusing because I'd like to know, what do those numbers reflect? Do they not, again, are they percentages? Are they the total number of people who responded out of the 200?
So 57 is the total number of people, but I can add that. What was the other one that I missed?
Well, in page 70, when you start out with the goals and objectives, on the survey, page 57, page 50, and there might be others, but those were kind of a few that I picked up on.
I'll go back and add a
Okay.
little red note that I added on some of them that told you whether or not it was a percentage or a.
I have to agree with Anne about North Stonington looking like it's going to be the next tourist center on page 75. You market the town as a place for a relaxing weekend escape. To me, we shouldn't change North Stonington into a tourist trap like Mystic. I'm like on page 31,
Wait, go back to 75 where that's in the goals itself.
page 70, goals and objectives. I think there were numbers. We need to put in numbers to indicate the number of survey responders. And the numbers that were attending the visioning center session and the total number from I guess you had boards that met together. And I think there was a number of total members in the boards that you met with. I just think there need to be more numbers, I think these numbers are so small.
They were small in your last POCD too. The only number that was different was the number of surveys. The rest of the numbers as far as who participated in neighborhood meetings and whatnot were actually the same. I just kept the same style and did it the same way.
Okay, going back to what Ann said about trying to not make North Stonington a tourist destination. When we get to, again, on page 76 and 79, you got a lot about green tourism and ag tourism. It seems like we have that over and over again. And yet on page 31, and throughout the whole thing, it says, people love living here and the rural character and whatever. And page 31, it says the reason that many have moved here and remain here is because of the rural characteristics. And a number of places, again, it's to protect the rural roads and the narrow roads. And so it seems to be contradicting each other as you're promoting tourism. And then on the other hand, we're trying to save the town because we like living here because it's rural.
Right. So there were two different groups of people there, and that's all speaks to the eventually trying to balance development and preservation. So there were people that did advocate for, marketing the town, for a lack of a better word, to appeal to tourism, to get more people here. So I did hear both sides. But that's ultimately, decisions that other boards and commissions will make, whether or not they decide to market the town. That's, that would be more EDC versus you, but there are ways to control it.
I also agree with Ann about comments about the town being divided. This was discussed also at one of our committee meetings, that it seemed to show that the town seems to have this negative feeling. And I don't think our town is like that. That's not North Stonington.
Just a quote from
You
the
put on page
comment.
29, again, found heal and divide and help minorities in the community to have a stronger voice. I don't know where or who wrote this, or if it was in the written survey, but
It was.
I didn't see that I went to every community meeting except
It
part
was
of
a
one,
written
and I
comment.
never heard that from any.
It was a written comment.
So again, we go with
three of them.
one
Yeah, it-
comment out of 200, and it makes the whole document look like we have a problem.
It was multiple comments, but it was in there. I think I did make, what page is that? Because I think I did alter that a little bit. 28. Before you move on, let me just check to see how I changed that.
I mean, in the data analysis you wrote,
I added was offered as a comment to that. So I had taken out one suggested that we provide funding to help shine a light on inequality. I took that out. And I took out and educate those who have an unconscious racism bias to help them understand and make changes. So I took out the direct quotes and just clarified that it was offered as a comment to try to
And
tone
then
that down here.
this data analysis sheet you gave us tonight says there's a very slight increase in diversity. We're still 90% white, and yet in this, our document, our non-white population grew by 40%.
That
And our
translated
white
to the seven
shrank by
people.
6.5%. So, I
That
have,
translated to 7 people, Pat.
well, I know, but,
The 40% increase was from like, 0.2 to 0.3. It was,
but
It's
it
not
makes us
much.
look like, there's a divisiveness, and I don't feel that this is North Stonington to say that in that document, and I agree with what
Good way
Ian
to say
said. Anyway, that's just my opinion. And you get the information about climate change. I'm not sure if we're really having climate change. First, recently we've had like 4 or 5 years of drought, and now we're having a flood. Can you call that climate change?
yes,
And then
absolutely.
floods go where the water was initially directed, and I think we found that out in 2010 when we had our floods, and the floods went over roads where the state had tried to change the direction of water paths. So I'm not quite sure if zoning can do anything about changing where waters are going to go. You also said, to help the farmers. To me, the farmers have been able to, but farmers who make their living have been able to deal with climate issues far greater than the zoning board could ever guide them.
Okay.
On page 66, you're talking about recent sampling of water. Not recent sampling, but sampling of water. And I thought 2 years ago that we did have water samples done. When Nate was a planner, he said that our samples had come back better now than it did 10 years ago. Do you have that data?
Nope. But it might be included in your WPCA plan. I'm not
Okay.
sure if this came from, this was reviewed by Bill, so.
Hmm.
But you can certainly add it when you do have that data.
Just another general comment. I think there was a lot of stuff included about individual businesses. And there are a lot of businesses in town that all of them have helped out residents. So I'm not quite sure if singling out single businesses really reflects how everybody feels about businesses in general. Let's see, what else do I have? Mhm. Mhm. Oh. On the page 80, the watershed resiliency, I do think the boards, I'm not sure which board, if it's the Conservation Commission or selectmen or whatever, but when bridges are replaced in town and roads, I think somebody needs to get involved as to making sure they're wide enough for walking areas or bicycles. We've had a number of bridges replaced in towns, and some of them may barely get 2 cars by. And page 87, I think we should omit the 2025 to 2030 draft until it's passed by the legislature. The last draft that they had, it took 4 years for them to complete, and even though you said it seems to be in the final works, until it's passed, it's not passed.
So I acknowledge it as a new draft.
Let's see, I think I had one more thing. No, I think my other comments refer to some of those possible actions to consider. That's all.
Just to let you guys know, I did close the public hearing because there was no one else who wanted to talk. So at this time, the board may talk about themselves to discuss any of the questions that are going on, just so you know. Oh, yeah, we're not throwing you out. I mean. Okay. You're welcome. All right, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close the public hearing on the POCD.
All in favor? 100%. Okay, now the board members, all of you can talk and amongst yourselves now and discuss what's going on.
The only thing, most people have covered questions or comments that I have, except for on page 74D. The way we're wording that about the HESCOG Law Office, I think we could reword that to seek funding to provide adequate septic capacity to support village redevelopment instead of naming out a particular person or building like was referred to by the public.
Which number is that? So I can make that note. Oh, I see it.
Then page
see it, yeah.
74, 2D,
It's on 75. Right.
if we could just maybe reword that in a way that it encompasses the village instead of the HESCOG Law Office, singling it out kind of.
So just redevelopment in the village.
Yes. Thank you.
Art, do you have any questions? Wayne, nothing to discuss?
I think that the plan we got of the conservation and development adoption, I think it's good. I think it's fine. I mean, you can go around and around, but I think that you're gonna find that it's about what we want to accomplish.
On the parking behind the town hall, can that be considered as part of redevelopment? Like if we ever needed to, are you talking about redevelopment for the Hescock house? What did you gonna change to redevelopment?
Well, I had put in something about, you know, there's an issue with the septic capacity of Chinook Brewery and the Hescock Law Office. There's no place to upgrade a septic system or something like that. So it was just a suggestion to try and address that so that something else could come into the Hescock Law Office, that particular building. Like it can't be used as a cafe or something like that because the septic system wouldn't support it. So what the suggestion was, which I like just fine, is just addressing that type of issue in the village so that other development could occur, you know, anywhere in the village. There's an issue with septic capacity, obviously, to support certain types of uses, which you may never consider. I mean, I don't know. It was just you know, if you want to the goal has always been to sort of redevelop vacant or underutilized buildings. So that is a challenge in the village because of the lack of septic infrastructure or capacity. Which is all he's saying, that the parking lots is something different and that would actually almost inevitably come under the first selectman, I think. Basically to address parking and that kind of issue, but.
Ed, I think it's important to note that, as Sue said to begin with, even though if we do vote to adopt the POCD tonight, it does not mean that it can't be reopened
2 months from now, 4 months from now, 6 months from now. So as we sit here on the 26th, and I believe it has to be voted in by the 31st, is that correct? I'm new to the,
That
Committee.
we're supposed to turn it in. The 31st is our deadline with the state. And yes, you are correct. And it also could be that other changes could come. Juliet referred to a couple of other plans that will be updated in the next few years. Those plans could have, impacts on this plan, and you might want to open up even just a section or two to say, oh, wait, these things actually now need to be updated. And it might not mean that you have to redo the entire thing, but you might need to redo certain references, or there might be specific things you want to make sure remain consistent across those plans.
so it's a fluid document.
It absolutely is.
So, I mean, I guess as we sit here tonight, I don't think there needs to be concern of we vote this tonight and this is where we have to sit for the next 10 years. I mean, it's a fluid document that can change as the town evolves. And I mean, the entire point of this is just to be it's a plan, but it's not a set guideline where if we vote this in tonight, this is how we have to follow it for the next 10 years. And as things change, we can change as a committee and to make it so it fits, what we think the new needs for the town are in that present time.
You can also develop strategic plans. This is your this is your bigger plan.
Correct.
It's supposed to sort of highlight your vision, your mission, and those broad goals and objectives that will get you to realize that vision. So it's meant to be a higher level guidance and also to provide a nice snapshot of town over the past years, and things you've accomplished and things you're proud of. So, there's multiple purposes to a POCD. It shouldn't be focusing nitty gritty on the actions and whatnot. Those are just suggestions. Any EDC can come up with its own strategies. Housing can come up with their own strategies.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get. That's my point is that, we're sitting here and we're focusing on a lot of minute points about, page 60, section D. Well, just because that's what's in this plan doesn't mean that's what we have to adhere to forever. This is just if we don't have this whatsoever, the town kind of goes forward rudderless. This is just giving us a basic idea of where we're heading towards that, at any point in time, we can choose to change the way we're heading, but we have to have some sort of a plan in place to move on.
Right, and to get funding,
Correct.
which you get from the state.
But then when you have changes, we still have to go before the public hearing process, right?
The process remains the same. So if you say, just as an example, 5 months from now, the EDC adopts a new strategic plan. Parts of their plan and parts of this plan aren't consistent. You decide that you really like what they've said in your plan. You want to update your plan to be reflective so that they're both consistent. Then you can break open the process, hold a public hearing, have public engagement about whatever the topic is. I'm just making an example. And then you close the public hearing and you vote on it to update it and you update your plan. You don't necessarily have to update every single thing in the plan when you break open a plan. I believe Juliet said at the beginning, from the time that she was here before, she was here for 8 of those 10 years. You accomplished a lot of the items that were in that 2013 plan. And so this was actually meant to be more of an update, but it turned out to be kind of a rewrite because you'd actually done a lot of the things that were in the plan already. Also, Connecticut is a little bit odd. In other parts of the country, they actually update things every couple of years in different categories. So in one of the towns that I worked in out west, they actually separated each of those categories. There was a whole set of utility chapters that was done in 1 year. And the next year they did the set of the conservation chapters. The next year they did everything about fire protection. So that's something that I've seen done out there. I really haven't seen that done in the towns that I've worked in the Northeast. But there are different ways to go about updating a plan. And some of it just might reflect on how the town changes or evolves or the other things that go on in town. we do our best to try to predict what we think might go on in the next 10 years, but we don't know. Tomorrow, something big could happen that maybe we don't know about. We certainly didn't know that COVID was coming. We had no way to predict that that was happening or how to cope with it. We coped with it. We learned things from it. We moved on. So we're different people now because of that happening. So you would hope that, you know, as we move forward as a town, that, you know, things are going to change and evolve. So if you needed to break back open the process, you can do that at any time.
I think with the ability that this is a living document, and as we have time to read it a little more than we've had a chance to and go over things, we can certainly have plenty of town meetings where we could see all you people and come in and make changes to it as we go. So I think with that being said, I would like to see if somebody would make a motion to approve the 2023 North Stonington Plan of Conservation and Development at this time. I have a second.
I'll second.
The edits of adding the verb about the parking lot, fixing up some of the pictures and take out the ones with the watermark, you know, and a couple of the other suggestions, and what was your feeling about the suggested actions being in the plan versus in another document? Just remembering that I put them in there again, was to try to reflect, try to let people know that I heard what they.
Well, the stuff that you agreed to when you were up there talking and you wrote down, I mean, as far as you trying to be inclusive with other people and putting their stuff in there, I mean, it's one person out of 5,200. I mean,
They bothered to show up.
well, I understand that. And, you know, these 18 people here decided to show up. I would like you to take them out. Correct.
They brought it down for the numerals and the objectives of the uppercase A, B, C, D, and the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then everything else out, I'm gonna put into a separate package as part of the packet that I get.
It's agreeable.
And I have to see do that makes sense, grammar and stuff is wording. But I'll do that.
Motion? Do we have to remodify the motion to say, to accept the POCD with the changes that were put forth tonight?
Right.
So that way. So I make a motion to, well, does Wayne have to rescind his or can I just make one?
Yeah, just,
I make a motion to pass the POCD with the aforementioned changes tonight that will be corrected.
second. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? No, no one opposed. Yeah.
Jamie, effective date, Ed, please?
Oh, as of March 20, yeah,
I put it March 31st on the paper that I had, but
all right, March
If we can give
31st
me
then,
the back.
2024.
you're gonna publish it tomorrow, right?
Yeah, but the appeal period is well until the 15th, so.
Yeah. Well, then, I mean,
If we publish it tomorrow.
it's usually the day after publication, isn't it? Okay, well, we can do it April 15th. We can still send it to the state so
I
they
can
can
send
see
it
that
to
it was adopted.
And
Mhm.
the appeal period will run out.
All right, so I'll change
Sounds good.
that page. And this is just a technical question. So that acknowledgement page, obviously, when I started this process, the Planning and Zoning Commission was different. So would you like me to recognize the new commission members on here as I'm gonna still recognize the existing ones and then the new ones. I've just, we note the members, but I can note that new members were added.
Can I get someone to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? All right.